Today, we're going to talk about three of the most iconic guitar amps in history, especially when it comes to rock, country, and even pop music as well. And those are Vox, Orange, and Marshall. And in this video, I'm going to show you how I use all three of those amps blended together to get an overall huge guitar sound. Now, if you're a songwriter, then it's worth sticking around until the end of the video where I've got a free download that will absolutely 100% benefit you and help you write better songs. Stick around to the end of the video and I'll tell you a little bit more about it. Okay, so this is a very modern pop rock production and we're using a pretty good blend of all three of those iconic guitar amps in this. So I want to show you the sound differences between the amps and also why I'm using certain amp sounds for certain parts. And then we'll look a little bit more about the arrangement and how all of that's working together. And then you can use some of these tips for your productions and for your songs as well. So I'll start off, I'll play a small section of this song for you. The verse is very sort of like chilled out and sort of like holding back, but then the chorus gets much bigger. There's lots of distorted guitars in there. So take a listen and then we'll break it down.
Do you know there's nothing left you can say that would make my brain erase the day that you stabbed me in the back? I'm just another one of your victims. You shut me down like everyone that comes your way. You slam the door right in their face. Now I know it's nothing personal, you're just so unpredictable, but I guess that's what I signed up for. 'Cause when I look in your eyes, it comes as no surprise that I see right through everything that you do. You can say that you'll make it right, but don't expect me to fight. 'Cause you know that I know all we got is a fairy tale. All we got is a fairy tale. A fairy tale.
Okay, so there's quite a lot going off in this song, and there's also quite a few guitar parts as well. There aren't a ton of layers, but there are quite a few guitar parts coming in and out at various different points. So let's start with the verse. Everything is very chilled, everything's very laid back, and we're mostly utilising clean and crunchy guitar tones here. So for that application, my first choice is always a Vox. I absolutely love the sort of glassy cleans that you can get from a Vox, and even in the crunch tones as well, it's got such a great mid-range sound to it. And also it's a really dynamic amp where if you can set the gain just on the brink of breakup, so just at the point where it's clean to crunch, you can get a sound that really responds to your playing. So if you play the guitar really lightly, you'll get a clean sound, but then if you start digging in, you'll get a crunch sound, and that's the point that I really like on a Vox amp. So, first of all, we've got this track here called Guitar Fills. This is a Vox. It's on that setting that I was just talking about, just on the brink, just on the knife edge of where clean becomes crunch, and it is just playing some fills. It's not getting in the way of the vocals, it's kind of filling those spaces where it makes sense. So, let's take a listen to that. So you can hear, especially on that last fill, the third note digs in a little bit more and it just breaks up, but some of the others are a little bit cleaner. Now, the specific amp that I'm using for this is actually a Vox AC30. It's a limited edition, and it's actually a Kemper profile. I've got a Kemper in the rack behind me, and this amp, in my opinion, is one of the nicest Vox sounds that you can get. If you have a Kemper yourself and you're interested in hearing more about it or trying it, then you can get the Kemper profiles from my website, adam-fiasco.com/Kemper profiles. I'll put the link in the description below. So that's the first guitar. We've also got this one here, which is called Vox Dreamy. Now, I wanted the verse of this to be, as the track says, dreamy, and just kind of like a really massive ambience to it. So this is also a Vox. It's the exact same amp. It's that AC15, the Kemper profile that I was just talking about. However, this has got an absolute ton of reverb on it. It's got like an everlasting reverb on it. Let's take a listen. So you can kind of just about hear the guitar playing some picking notes. There's a little bit of delay on it, but that reverb just goes on and on and on forever. I really, really like that sound. It adds a really nice texture in the background of this song. It's almost synth-like. I could have used a synth, but in this case, I came across this amp, I put a reverb on it, and I just really liked what it was doing. Now, another place that we're utilising the Vox is on this one here. This is actually an AC30. AC15 and AC30, they're kind of similar in nature. This is also a Kemper profile. I believe this is from the Howard Benson pack. It's one of my favourite Kemper profile packs. But this is a driven Vox. So this is with the gain way cranked. And this is just playing some unison notes at the end of the chorus that you might have picked up on. Let's take a listen to that. Now, the reason that I chose the Vox specifically for that sound is because of how mid-forward it is. It blends really, really well with the orange, which we're going to hear in a minute, and it's also just on one side. Oranges are quite mid-range forward amps as well, but the thing with the Vox is it's lower gain. Even though the gain is cranked, Voxes are much lower gain than the orange. So they tend to be a little bit more pointy, and you can hear a little bit more attack from them. And that's what I wanted. I wanted that unison picking bit. I wanted to hear the tack. I wanted to hear the pick hitting the strings. But I also wanted a good mid-forward crunch sound. And for that sound, the Vox is perfect. Now, moving on to the chorus has a pair of rhythm guitars just playing power chords left and right. For both of those, we used an orange Rockerverb. The orange Rockerverb is one of my favourite orange amps. It's a classic. It's a classic for a reason. Oranges are typically much higher gain than Voxes. So where you've got a rock song, or maybe even country music where you really want the chorus to lift, these can be great. They provide a lot of gain, but you still get some good note articulation as well because of that forward mid-range. And that is one of the reasons that I love orange amps. So let's take a listen to this. Very, very simple. Not doing a complicated strumming pattern because we don't want anything to clash, don't want anything to get in the way of anything else that's happening in the production at that time. But it's just got an overall really well balanced sound. Sometimes for rhythm guitars like this, I'll use quad guitars. So there'll be a pair of lower gain guitars doing the crunchy stuff that gives you really good definition. Sometimes I might use a Vox for that, and then I might blend it with something like an orange Rockerverb or something that's a bit higher gain like a Sound City or a Wizard or something like that. However, in this song, that orange Rockerverb on its own was giving me everything that I wanted. It's got some nice lows, it's got some nice highs, but it's also really mid-forward. It just works. Now, at the end of that section is where the AC30 comes in, the Vox. Let's take a listen to how both of those work together. So as you can hear, the Vox AC30 is much lower gain. Still two very mid-forward amps, but because the Vox is lower gain, you get that attack. You get a little bit more point on it. And so as a blend, those work really, really well. Now, right at the end, we have some palm mutes. That's a really key moment of the song, and I felt on its own, the orange just wasn't enough. It could maybe automate that up in the mix and that would help, but I think it needs another sound, and this is where we're now blending in a Marshall. This track right here, guitar heavy, this is a Marshall JCM800. Again, one of the most classic Marshalls that you can get. Again, I believe this is a Kemper profile. It's from the Howard Benson pack. Incredible, incredible amps. If you are a Kemper owner, then you should definitely buy the Howard Benson pack as well as mine. But anyway, let's take a listen to what this sounds like. Straight away, you can hear a night and day difference between the Marshall and the orange. The Marshall is much more scooped in the mids, whereas the orange is more mid-forward. The Marshall has got massive, massive lows. It's also got really, really prominent upper mids and highs. It's almost squeaky sounding, but that mid-range is a little bit more scooped. It's also higher in gain. Let's take a listen to both of those together, just for that last section. That is so much better now. The orange has the mid-range, the Marshall has that huge bottom end. Let's take a listen to all of that so far together. I'm going to mute the vocals just so that you can concentrate a little bit more on the arrangement and really hear what the guitars are doing. So starting with those clean crunch Voxers, we then go through to the chorus where the orange Rockerverb comes in. We then get that AC30 that's a little bit driven, and then we also get the Marshall coming in right at the end. Let's take a listen. Okay, so those guitars blend really, really well and they complement each other incredibly well. And that really is the art of good production and good arrangement. It's choosing sounds that complement each other. Now, just after that chorus, there's a breakdown sections. The vocals kind of do some really high held on stuff, but the guitars are the main focus. Take a listen to the orange Rockerverb guitars here. So this is a really heavy section, and on their own, those orange Rockerverbs are just not enough. It sounds weak, it sounds a bit lifeless, and just overall anemic. But that's where we've blended in the Marshall JCM800, because what the orange lacks, the Marshall has in spades, and that is massive low end, and also a really fizzy top end as well, which together, they just work. Take a listen to what the Marshall sounds like here. And together, that gives us this. Now let's put that into the track. We can hear it in context. So there we have a really, really good example of how we blend in three iconic different guitar amps to get one overall huge sound. Now it's important to mention here that by no means are these the only amps that you would want to use in a production. However, you can get very far with these if that is all you have. In this particular song, I've also got a Sound City amp. That is the one that's playing like a repeated 8th note pattern in the chorus. I'll just show you that now. That sounds really good. It kind of sits probably somewhere in between the Orange and the Marshall for me. And there's also this amp down here, which is a Fender Blues Deluxe amp. This has got a tremolo effect on it. The Fender is probably a little bit closer to the Vox in terms of tone. It's very, very jangly, and it has a very sort of open sound to it. The cleans are really, really nice. However, on balance, my personal taste always seems to favour the Vox a little bit more. But your mileage might vary when it comes to that. Now, at this point, if you're a songwriter, it would make a lot of sense for you to download my songwriter's checklist. You've just seen a very brief snapshot there of how I'm arranging the guitars in a pop rock production. However, there's a lot more to arranging a song than just guitars. There's a ton of things that you need to consider. And getting the arrangement right is absolutely key to how your song is going to impact your listeners. Songwriting absolutely is an art. However, there's certain steps and certain processes that we have to do every single time to make sure our music hits the mark and has the desired impact that we want it to have on our listeners. Also, as listeners, we expect to hear certain things from music, and we expect it to make us feel a certain way, especially if we're going to keep listening to that song over and over again. And if you want your listeners to hit the repeat button, then you absolutely have to start with a good arrangement. So despite songwriting being an art, there is still structure, and that structure is on this checklist. This is the exact process that I go through with every single one of my production clients before we even hit the record button. We make sure that our song is arranged in the best possible way and that it is going to have the impact that we want it to have on our listeners so that they want to hit the repeat button over and over again. This can also help it land on Spotify playlists that can get you tons of streams. It can also help you get a ton of radio play, because radio stations will want to pick up your music if it's very, very listenable and people are liking it. And also, it just means that your song is a lot more pitchable. If you're interested in pitching your music to record labels, to music supervisors or publishers for things like sync. So go ahead and download the Songwriter's Checklist. The link is in the description below.